Hey, this is Mark A. Altman, and if you're a fan of the 4:30 movie, you'll love Best Movies Never Made, hosted by Jodorowsky's Dune producer Steve Scarlatta and Josh Miller, where they explore some of the greatest movies that were never made, from E.T. 2 to Tim Burton's Superman, Night Skies to Star Trek The Academy Years. New episodes available every other Monday, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hey, this is Chase Masterson, host of Disco Nights, inviting you to join us every Sunday as the disco party continues with our fabulous guests.
Like us.
Like you. And you, our audience. So we'll see you here next Sunday night. Bring your disco shoes.
If you're a Star Trek fan, you should listen to Inglorious Treksperts, the ultimate Star Trek podcast for sci-fi fans with a life. Listen to it wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, this is Mark A. Altman, and this is a special encore presentation of Films About Filmmaking Week. This was our first attempt to do a riskier episode of the series. You know, we'd done a couple which were sort of very genre heavy. We knew they would do well. They all did. 7 Days of 007, Superhero Weeks. We were very much in the Sword and Sorcery, which was a huge episode for us. But this was the first time we decided to go the cinephile route. You know, we were going to get away from the genre stuff, and we weren't sure what the reaction would be to Films About Filmmaking Week. And we were so gratified to see that we held our audience. It continues to be a perennial. It was a very successful episode for us. It continues to be. And I think it's one of our best episodes. I mean, you can sense the love we have for movies about movie making. You know, we always talk about how all of us, came out here to make film and television. It was kind of like Close Encounters. We're all making our mashed potato mountains. Some of us heard the signal, some of us didn't. But we're lucky enough. In fact, the reason we're on hiatus is because we're all working. So it's a good problem to have. You know, we weren't anticipating going to season 2 so early, but Ashley is running a show right now, and Steve's working with him. I can't say what it is. I'm doing a show, and Daren's on a show. So it's a good problem to have. So we're on a hiatus while we hopefully are making some good television, and we'll be back though with season 2 this spring, and we're looking forward to getting back in the studio and doing some new theme weeks. But meanwhile, you can enjoy an encore presentation of Films About Filmmaking Week, which features some great movies. And if you haven't seen them, you should check them out, because I think it's everything we want in a show. It's some of the classics, but also a few more esoteric movies that you may not know about that you may want to enjoy checking out. And recently, Susan Kazmarek asked us on social media, how can I see these movies? Well, if you've exhausted streaming, all this stuff is available on Vudu and iTunes, or you can go on Amazon or your local video store. Good luck with that. But everything we cover is either available on digital or DVD Blu-ray. So if you're persistent, you can find the movies. I think the only movie we talk about this week that isn't available, that's going to be harder for you to find, is The Oscar. Harlan Ellison's The Oscar. But if you ask Daren very nicely, maybe he can send you a copy. Anyway, enjoy the special encore presentation of Films About Filmmaking Week, and we'll see you next week.
Back in the 70s and 80s, before the advent of VHS, chances are if you saw a classic movie, it was on the 4:30 movie. With their famous theme weeks, it was a chance to see movies you never saw and get reacquainted with some old classics. Now, join us on the 4:30 Movie Podcast.
Welcome. This is Mark A. Altman, and you are joining us on the 4:30 movie for the Kids Stay in the Picture Week. These are films about filmmaking. I'm Mark A. Altman, a writer-producer for such shows as Librarians and H&X, as well as the author of the new book, So Say We All, an oral history of Battlestar Galactica. And I'm here with our usual panel of programmers, our ace programmers. To my left is the talented Ashley E. Miller. The E stands for evil. And he is a writer for such films as Thor and X-Men First Class, the upcoming Red Sonja. And in addition to such TV classics as Fringe and Black Sails, he has the upcoming season 2 of Lore dropping on Amazon Prime this month. Ashley, welcome.
I'm not wearing any pants.
You don't need to, because...
This is theater of the mind.
Oh
actually, come to think of it, you kind of do.
The theater of the pants.
Pants theater.
It's appropriate for Hollywood Week that you're not wearing any pants.
Oh my goodness!
So, also, we have Stephen Melching here. He's a writer for such series as Batman the Brave and the Bold, X-Men the Animated Series, the brilliant Star Wars Rebels, and the upcoming Star Wars Resistance. Welcome, Steve.
Roll 'em.
Wow, that's some real Hollywood speak there. And finally, last but not least, the great Darren Dochterman, a conceptual designer for films and TV, such as Master and Commander and the second season of Westworld. And he is also the designer of our fantastic new website, just 430movie.com. No the. Drop the for
Drop
savings.
We're dropping the and passing the savings on to you.
430movie.com, and you can find some great swag. You can also find links to all our episodes. And if you are enjoying the podcast, we appreciate you rating it or reviewing it wherever you consume your podcasts. And if you don't like it, shut the hell up. So anyway, welcome, guys. This is an exciting week because, of course, we all met because of our love of making movies and television, and fortunately have all been working in the industry now for a while. I think it's always been fascinating to watch how the sausage is made.
So thanks and good night.
And there are some truly great movies and then some really mediocre films about behind the scenes of making films.
Hollywood loves to make movies about itself almost as much as it likes to give itself awards.
Right.
That's true. And yet, if you've ever pitched anything which is Hollywood-centric or industry, the response is always, yeah, that's great, but we think it's a little too inside baseball. Nobody's going to get it.
And then you try to pitch a baseball movie?
And they say it's a little too inside movies.
So, Steve,
Sure.
Monday, usher us into Kid Stays in the Picture Week.
Well, there's one film that has always been close to my heart since it came out in the 90s. It is, for my money, Tim Burton's best film, Ed Wood, which is the story of Ed Wood, a filmmaker in the 50s who is responsible for some of what are considered the worst movies of all time. But what I love about this movie...
They've never seen a movie by Uwe Boll.
But what I love about this movie is the tone of it, the spirit of it, this story of this guy who has such tremendous passion for filmmaking, and yet his reach exceeds his grasp. He can't. He's not good, but he's so wants to be good.
Passionate.
He's so passionate, and it's infectious. And how he puts together this group of weirdos and like-minded people to go along with him and make these lousy movies. And he strikes up a friendship with one of his film idols.
Bela Lugosi.
Who is in the last years of his life, and
Played by the great Martin Landau.
Martin Landau, God rest his soul. He was brilliant.
You may know him as Commander Koenig from Space 1999.
He won an Oscar for that performance,
And well-deserved.
rightly so.
Well-deserved.
Eddie, I'm so broke.
Let's shoot this fucker.
It's such a quotable movie,
Yeah.
and it has just a terrific cast, led by Johnny Depp in my favorite performance of his.
Yeah.
And it's just a wonderful film. It's funny, it's moving, it's weird.
Yeah. Well, the next one will be better.
It's so funny because, La La Land talks about, the dreamers who make, movies. And I love La La Land. Truly, Ed Wood is an homage to the dreamers because Ed Wood was a man of very little talent but of great passion. And it's so great because I don't think the film is ever malicious.
No, that's what's so great about it. You are really rooting for this guy, and you can see that he's not good. The stuff he's making. What's her name?
Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Well, I know the actress who plays his girlfriend,
Sarah Jessica Parker.
Sarah Jessica Parker. He goes on this whole rant about these movies are terrible. You're wasting your time, and maybe she's right, but you are so with this guy and you want to see him succeed. You're pulling for him. And when they're breaking into the studio to steal the giant octopus, you want them to get that octopus and you want them to make their days and get their shots.
You want them to get through that door.
Exactly. And just his struggles with money and with cast and crew and
with shady producers and
getting baptized to sort of bilk
a church out of money for funding his
Do
movies.
you pledge to renounce Satan and all his evil? Sure.
Sure. Yeah, Bill Murray, of course. Yeah, Bill Murray, another great in a smaller role, but is terrific.
In one of the first of his smaller role appearances, actually.
Yeah.
And yet, anyone who has financed or attempted to finance an indie movie, can see so much of reality in that. As crazy as it feels with the church, and then, will you cast my girlfriend and all this? I mean, it's so typical of the way that the business really works, and it's just a great
and then,
film.
And it climaxes at the premiere of Plan 9 from Outer Space. This is the one they'll remember me for.
Yeah.
And you're so happy that he did it. He triumphed over adversity.
Mm-hmm.
It's an underdog story, and it's just
Absolutely.
wonderful. And it has a terrific screenplay by Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski. And Tim Burton, it was terrific directing. It's filmed in black and white
And it's
in
beautiful.
the 90s.
So ballsy to have done that, and it works so well.
Yeah.
And it is a relentlessly positive movie about the power of believing in your own creativity. And I think, for me, my takeaway from that film was, look, a lot of Hollywood, I think, has turned to this sort of self-indulgent, kind of self-loathing into kind of a bit of an addiction. I think we all know people who work in this business who don't seem to be having any goddamn fun. And the truth of the matter is we're so blessed, we're so privileged to work in this business where we can create things that we love. And you know what? There's always going to be people who don't want us to do that, who want to say stop. And the lesson of Ed Wood is they exist, but we still have this thing that we believe in. We still have this vision in our heads. And as long as we have that, and we stay positive about it, like we can't really be defeated. And it has nothing to do with whether the final product is great or dog shit. It has to do with how we feel about it. And I think that's what's so powerful about Ed Wood. And I think
As long as we don't care if we're recognized until after we're dead.
yes, pretty much. But how many people are recognized even then?
Well, it's so great because Scott and Larry, who've sort of become the kings of the biopic, have done so many magnificent biopics. People versus Larry Flint, the O.J. miniseries for American Crime Story,
Man on the Moon.
Man on the Moon.
Agent Cody Banks.
So many, not that, but so many really brilliant, and yet Ed Wood, I think, towers, above all of them. Arguably OJ's in the same league. Well, and the Flint picture is great too, but it's just such a wonderful
None of them
movie.
are as a joy to watch as
Yes,
As Ed
Ed
Wood.
I
that's
watch
true.
Ed Wood every year like clockwork. I revisit it, at least once a year because it's just so much fun. It's inspiring. I love the relationship between Ed and Bella where, they develop this real friendship and Ed sees him as this huge movie star still, and he's trying to help him make a comeback and, taking care of him when he goes into drug rehab. He's one of the first actors to go into, publicly go into drug rehab.
Eddie, what kind of a movie is this?
And it really
giant
captures.
I love children.
It captures that exuberant, let's put on a show
Yeah.
feeling that you have, when you're young in this business before it, the cynicism takes over and it kicks the shit out of you.
And
But
it reminds
And you
you
turn
of what
22.
it would. That's why I like to watch it every year. It reminds you of that feeling, and it kind of at least for me anyway, it kind of re-energizes me in a way. Not that I want to be re-energized to make terrible things, but just to recapture that spirit.
It's great to see him and his goofy band of oddballs, try and go it alone, basically. And it's hilarious.
What year was it? It was
95, I believe.
Yeah, look, man, I wasn't even here. I was, still off living a completely different life when I saw that movie. And so I saw it through the eyes of someone who wanted to do what I'm doing now. And also as a fan. And here, something really, I don't know if this is good or bad for fandom, but when we were boys, when we were lads, yes, we had our Star Wars, which was big and beautiful and people spent a lot of money on it. And there were anything that Spielberg made always looked kind of great. But But you watch a movie like Plan 9 from outer space, or we think of like what generally kind of filled the shelves with the genre material. We're not talking about films that spent $150 million a pop, right? It's something like
$50 a pop.
$150. Yeah, you know, exactly. It's like it's something that that we embraced as kind of part of the process. So there's a whole read of Ed Wood that is about loving movies like that in spite of themselves.
And it captured the feeling of like when you're making your Super 8 movies as a kid, you know, you're taking stuff and trying to make them spaceships and filming in your backyard and, you know, just and feeling like this is going to be the greatest thing ever. And then you show it to your friends and your parents like, this is the greatest, I made the greatest movie. And, you know, you look at it now, it's like, all right. But it's really remarkable. And I remember the first time I saw it was at the Telluride Film Festival. And, you know, I loved it. I was online with a couple of people and they were on the fence about what is this? They didn't know what it was. And I said, oh, it's great. You have to see it. And this is what it's about. And they said, wait a second. After I explained it, it's like, wait, and it's great? I said, yes. No, it's great. You have to see it. And I remember it was an older couple, you know, it's two septuagenarians. And I ran into them a couple of days later online for another film. And they say, we're so glad that you told us to see. We would have never seen it based on the description, but based on your recommendation, we went to see it and we loved it. And, you know, it's one of those discoveries for people who don't know the genre and don't know who Ed Wood is like we do that I think they come to and really be surprised.
And there's another wonderful element in it, too, which is Ed Wood is a character who's struggling with an untraditional sexuality in the film, and he's never judged by it. I mean, one girlfriend judges him on it, but ultimately he's accepted for who he is, and throughout over the course of the film,
great taste in Agora sweaters. So,
he sort of kind of literally comes out of the closet in a way. You know,
Right.
He's not homosexual in the film, but he likes to wear women's clothing.
He's transvestite.
And he's not judged by it. By any of the characters,
because
that care
everyone
about
accepts
him.
everyone in that movie,
Yeah.
you know, because they're all oddballs, they're all
Thor Johnson,
and you know, and no one, right? And it's great because sort of like
a drug addict, a transvestite,
and there's
wrestler.
no judgment about
Yeah.
any of that, and they find it's in a way they find each other, you know, the oddballs, the outcasts, the geeks, and then they come together, you know, triumphantly, regardless of whatever you think of the movie. I mean, it's legend. There's so many movies that were made that year and that decade that nobody remembers, even some of the great movies. I mean, there are probably more people, you ask them about a Douglas Sirk classic from the 50s or about Plan 9, more people probably know Plan 9 from outer space. It's a really remarkable thing.
And it also has a terrific music score by Danny Elfman that kind of captures.
Wasn't it Howard Shore?
Oh no, you're right. It
was
is Howard Shore.
Howard
Oh
Shore,
my gosh.
but Danny Elfman kind of really wished that he had,
Yeah.
because it would have totally.
Brilliant.
It's a terrific score.
Yeah, it
it
is.
captures both that sort of cheesy, you know, sci-fi film of the period flavor, but
Yeah.
also has a really sort of moving, emotional score to it as well.
Yeah, that's great. That's
Totally
great.
agree.
Darren,
Yes,
that was
Mark.
Monday. Monday is Ed Wood. Tuesday is
So
tell us.
Tuesday is a movie that a lot of people have forgotten about, as far as I know, because no one ever talks about it anymore. It's from 1989. It's called The Big Picture.
Oh, really? I was going to mention that. Oh, that's interesting. It wasn't my choice, but I was
it's
gonna
one of
mention
my
it.
favorites. It's Christopher Guest before he started doing his, unscripted sort of semi-documentaries.
Really, yeah, the first one after Spinal Tap. But
Yeah.
before.
It's It's after Spinal Tap, but before Waiting for Guffman, and it's a lot of fun. It's
Yes.
not great. There are some parts that are a little goofy in it, but it's really funny. And it stars Kevin Bacon as this film school grad. Incidentally, the script for this movie was originally about an older filmmaker trying to get his movie made in Hollywood, and it sort of mirrors the story in the movie in that no one would buy it with an older filmmaker.
Right,
So
right.
he had to make it a film school guy.
He's going to
and-
like AFI or some
Yeah,
equivalent
yeah.
thereof. Yeah.
Up on the hill at this sort of AFI-like school. And he basically is thrust into the blender of Hollywood, and he has this sort of pure idea at the beginning for this black and white film that he wants to make. And it's this,
This Bergman-esque-
it's this
yeah, yeah.
Bergman-esque, story about adults dealing with adult things. And the machine of Hollywood grinds him up and spits him out. And it is incredibly enjoyable. There's
And
a great
accurate.
and accurate. There's a great supporting cast. Terry Hatcher's in it. Jennifer Jason Leigh plays one of his schoolmates at the film school.
And the great J.T. Walsh.
Yes,
is the
exactly.
Studio executive.
J.T. Walsh is
so great.
so amazing in an office that is sort of reminiscent of the way Amblin was, with all the southwestern things, and he collects thimbles.
It
and
changes though every time he goes.
That's the thing.
Oh, sorry.
Every time the J.T. Walsh moves to a different studio after he's fired from the previous one, he has a different style, and it's just hilarious. But I highly recommend it if you can find it.
It's on DVD. It's on Blu-ray. I almost ordered it.
I haven't seen the Blu-ray.
It is on Blu-ray.
Okay.
Yeah. I
And
think
it's cheap, too. It's less
Echo
than
Bridge
$10.
put it out. It's pretty
Okay,
cheap.
good.
And I think they just added to a collection of films on filmmaking or something.
It's well worth your time. It really captures the film school experience as well.
Oh,
It's dead on film school experience. I mean, I was in film school at the time the film came out. It was eerie how
It was one of the first Laserdiscs I ever bought, and I think that's how I saw it. I don't think I saw it in a theater, and it's wonderful. It's a few years. It precedes another movie which is somewhat similar, which is Swimming with Sharks,
Right.
with Michelle Forbes and Frank
Spacey.
Whaley. And which deals with a guy who's working for an abusive assistant, but it's that kind of breaking into the film business. I think Big Picture is a better movie, but I like Swimming with Sharks also.
Yeah.
And Big Picture is not a film that people talk about a lot.
Exactly.
It's so entertaining, and the parodies throughout as he is trying to retool the movie based on studio notes is
He spends the whole
Very accurate.
he gets his big break to make his feature, and he realizes that he's not going to be able to get everything he wants, and just watching him compromise one after the other and try to please everybody that he's trying to please, and he just ends up making garbage as a result until the end when he's finally able to make
be
his
unshackled,
vision of it.
And it's so funny because they show the other faux AFI candidates and their films, which is just so entertaining. All the archetypes and the genres, and it's really a delightful.
But I think
film.
the greatest part that I think about it is that his movie idea is really terrible.
Yes.
It's really boring.
Yes.
And no one would ever watch it.
Yeah, you know
I
what
think
he's
that's
like?
what's great about the whole
He's like
story.
all these indie filmmakers now who are like, I have to shoot on film.
Yeah.
I will only shoot on. I will not do the movie. And it's like, dude, you have a limited budget. You shoot fucking digital. It's not going to be. It's going to be shown in digital. You're lucky if it's even going to be in a
It's
theater.
pretension
Shoot it on your
incarnate.
Oh my
goddamn
God.
phone.
And it's like, and they're like, oh no, I have to shoot it on
He wants
film.
to do this character drama in a snow-swept cottage, and then
Oh
it's
my
like,
God,
well,
it's
can't we set
terrible.
this at the beach?
But the way-
Get
yeah,
some more
and
women in
the
there,
smash
some
cut to the-
bikinis or whatever. It's
Yeah,
like
I
awful.
knew the bikini girl in that Beth Chamberlain, who was later on a soap when I worked at a talent agency in New York, and I would always ask her about that movie because it was like I just loved Big Picture. It was like, oh, I love that movie. I think it's so fun.
We could call it Beach Nuts.
But
Now
yeah,
I want
it's
to
a
go
great
home
choice.
and order that Blu-ray.
Yeah,
I've been
it's a good
wanting
one.
to rewatch it.
Yeah,
it's
that's
really
a
good.
great choice. And so far, two very unexpected choices from both of you. So I'm curious to see what Ashley has to say.
What I have to say, Mark, is a nutless monkey could do your job. A nutless monkey. Of course, I'm talking about 2008's Tropic Thunder, which, for my money, is the greatest movie ever made about making movies. Directed
Wrong.
by... Yeah, totally true.
I
Directed
love
by-
the movie, but you're wrong.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe.
We'll
Directed
get
by
to that.
Ben Stiller.
Right.
I would argue that it is Ben Stiller's best movie.
Maybe.
Okay. It's better than Zoolander 2, I'll give you that much.
Yes, I'll agree with that.
And it's amazing. Robert Downey Jr. is, I would describe him as a revelation in this film. He's a dude dressed up as a dude playing another dude. He has truly excellent advice on what will and will not win you an Oscar. And really sort of on-point analysis of I Am Sam and Forrest Gump.
Well, he's playing this Australian actor that is basically in blackface, playing a black actor, playing a black role.
It's crazy.
And then, yes,
Yeah,
this movie is it's when it's basically it's a dramatization of I think one of the
Apocalypse Now.
Apocalypse Now, but also one of the sort of the key metaphors of making anything in this town, which is you're going to war.
Right.
You've got your army and you're going to war, and you got to get. And they literally go to war. They find themselves in the middle of a real, no kidding war.
Yeah. Trying
to shoot a war film, and it sends up. The sort of the pretentious conventions of other war films.
Yes.
There's a brilliant send up of Platoon and just all the supporting characters are amazing. And honestly, I think if Tropic Thunder did nothing else for this industry, it reintroduced Tom Cruise to the American public and made the public love him again
as a human being, a construct.
Yeah. Exactly. Not like it was because it was right after the whole business with him on Oprah and jumping on the couch, and everybody's like, okay, he's lost his mind, and we're done with him.
Yeah. And
it
rebounded with that movie.
Absolutely, because he was just so great.
And that's another in a long line of like these great studio boss performances, like his performance, and that's great. Then you had Michael Lerner and Barton Fink, brilliant as a studio boss. There are a couple of like these iconic, obviously. I think that that Walter Pidgeon in Bad the Beautiful is another one of these great studio boss. I mean, there's some great studio boss, and he belongs in that pantheon with what was it, Les Nessman or
Les
no?
Nessman?
No, that was
WKRP in Cincinnati. There were so many turkeys. I thought that they were supposed to. Anyway. He was. What the hell was his name? Doesn't anybody have IMDb?
Les Grossman.
Les Grossman.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we don't like to look at IMDb because we like to do this off the top of our heads.
Damn right we do.
So you won't find
some
us relying on
some of us don't look at
IMDb.
It's
like my voice kind of going in and out as I'm kind of looking down.
I'd rather us be wrong than have to rely on this little mini computer in our pockets,
which we do anyway. We don't.
It's
all.
It's all at the top of our tip of our tongue. Okay, so Tropic Thunder for Wednesday. Does anybody want to dispute that, or are we going to let that one slide?
Do I hear?
Well, there are a lot. I mean, I think once we get to discussing the potential Friday film, there are a lot of great films we haven't touched on yet.
Yeah,
so
I know,
we
and
might
I'm
want to
about
revisit some
to
of
talk
these,
about them right now. Now that we've gone through the
them. No, you're Thursday.
Yeah, you got to do Thursday.
You have
I'm
to
going
do
to do Thursday.
All right.
What's your pick?
Well, now that we've just gone through the confection sickly sweet, I'm ready to.
Confection.
I'm ready. I'm ready. We had our little appetizers. I'm ready for the real
Thunder
deal.
is
Gonna
the
get
madness
serious.
of making films.
Let's get serious.
Okay,
Let's get serious. Okay.
Yep.
Look, this is a no-brainer.
I know what you're going.
Oh, good.
Well, I have two, but I'm going to start with the one that you can't do this movie week, films about filmmaking, without starting with the granddaddy, the masterpiece, Sunset Boulevard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, you have to. Billy Wilder's classic movie featuring the incomparable William Holden as a struggling screenwriter who basically becomes a kept man for Norma Desmond, played by the brilliant Gloria Swanson.
He becomes literally her pool boy.
Yeah. And I mean, it's filled with that sparkling Billy Wilder, cynical, dark dialogue that typified almost all of his movies, and then it's just filled with genius performances, and you have Otto Preminger in there playing. Not Otto Preminger.
No.
You have Von Stroheim playing,
Yes.
who's brilliant as the butler. Quiet, the musicians mustn't hear. and then Cecil B. DeMille playing himself.
Yeah.
The imperious Cecil B. DeMille. I mean, it's such. It's a film noir. It's a film about filmmaking. It's a twisted romance.
And it's also a document of Hollywood.
Oh, yeah, because you got Buster Keaton in there.
Yeah.
I mean, you have these classic actors. I mean, you have the whole story. Gloria Swanson was a huge silent film star who couldn't get arrested, and then plays basically herself.
Yeah.
Is I mean, it's brilliantly shot.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those locations are still here in town.
Well, I have a little story about that.
You got Gloria Swanson to take you home and become her pool boy.
No.
I don't have a pool.
But
no.
the girl that he meets, who works as a writer assistant
At Paramount, where the Star Trek offices were.
her office up those stairs, up above stage 9, is my office when I was working on the pilot of Voyager. That's
Wow.
where
And
that's
was she
my
still there
office.
working on the?
She was not still there.
Is it Voyager or Voyagers?
No, it was Voyager,
Okay.
the TV show.
Star Trek.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
she
know,
was
but
working
there
on
was
Voyagers with John Eric Hexum. He
Right,
got
like-
confused.
Yeah.
I said, don't aim that at your head.
God. Is it too soon?
Wow.
I know it's
That
not
was
too
30
soon
years
actually, 'cause
ago.
it was
Harsh.
like
But yeah, that was my office, and I would.
That's gotta be-
It's
crazy.
hilarious. It's
Wow.
hilarious.
I'm. That's amazing. That's pretty. That's pretty cool. You come out to Hollywood. You work on all these great shows, and then to be in the that's Hollywood history right
Yep.
there.
Yep.
I mean, it's like when we filmed Free Enterprise on the stages where they filmed Citizen Kane. It was just like the weirdest thing for us.
Well, Sunset Boulevard, no dispute, is a stone cold classic. It's one of those just great films that you hear is great, and you're like, is it really that great? And then you watch it. Yeah, it is that great.
Is
It
it
is
weird that I
terrific.
think of it as a horror movie?
Yeah,
It is a horror
I
movie.
mean, it is. That's why
It totally is a horror movie. You have the haunted house. You have the strange denizens. It's completely
and the
a horror
opening
movie.
shot
unsettled me.
where there's a body dead in the pool,
Right.
with the
What?
basically the tilt. No, I'm talking about the opening of the movie. That's the first shot, and you're looking up through the pool.
Yeah.
With the dead man
the dead man
narrating.
floating. Well, that's the spoiler right there.
Well,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
So-
60-year-old movie spoilers.
He says
Damn
it's
it,
him.
Melching.
Yeah, that's true.
He says it's him.
Okay. Fair
It's
enough.
all right.
But that's spoiling like the
It's the sled.
second 35.
But yeah. So.
So what's your other? You had another.
Well,
another
yeah,
one?
and I would put this
Put
into
this out for
consideration
Friday.
for Friday. So Thursday, Sunset Boulevard.
I agree.
Friday, and I truly feel like talk about a great movie about filmmaking is Kirk Douglas in The Bad and the Beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, just an amazing film. He plays Jonathan Shields, a studio executive that everyone hates, who's basically he got a lot of people their starts and then managed to alienate a screenwriter, an actress, and a director that he worked with, played by William Powell, Gloria Graham, and who was it? And then. Who was it? I think it's time to go to IMDb. So
Don't go to IMDb.
And
Oh no, I was just reminding
you were
myself
answering
of
your
something
phone.
else.
but anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
it is a brilliant movie about redemption. It really captures again. All these Hollywood movies have, for the most part, have the same thing in common. They're all cynical and dark and about betrayal. Which is why the outliers are sort of Tropic Thunder and Ed Wood, and that's why it was nice to start the week with Ed Wood, because I think we're sort of going down the heart of darkness, down the river, and it's getting darker and darker because, by the time you get to something like Bad and the Beautiful, I mean, that is really a remarkably
So it was Lana Turner,
Lana
Gloria
Turner,
Graham, and
of course.
Dick Powell.
Yeah. Okay, I missed Lana Turner. How did I miss
Thanks,
Lana Turner?
Thanks, Google.
As long as we're down in the pit with that.
Oh, wait, I have another quick story about. Is this about a different movie?
Yeah, this is about a different movie. But go ahead.
So, literally the first day of film school at USC, they showed us this movie, The Bad and the Beautiful. They had all the incoming freshmen, brought us into the Norris Theater, and showed The Bad and the Beautiful as like
30% left, and we're never seen
like
again.
this is what you guys are getting into. This is like, this was in the 80s when they showed us this, but it really is a terrific drama about at least the studio system of Hollywood.
Agreed. I think that I would be remiss if I didn't mention Robert Altman's The Player.
Yes.
True.
For sure.
To me, that is the most realistic portrayal of certainly the studio end of the business, and it's a fairy tale.
Yeah.
A dark fairy tale.
A very dark fairy tale, but the characters in it are so real, and their motivations are incredibly real, and it's just so much fun to watch, to see what could be stereotypical performances, but they're spot on.
And it's so meta too, because
Yeah.
you have them referring to the Touch of Evil shot
Right.
when
they're
basically
doing the
Robert
Touch of
Altman
Evil
is
shot.
doing the Touch
Yeah.
of Evil shot. No relation, by the way.
That's right.
And then you have Tim Robbins giving one of the best performances
Yeah.
of his career. Also, Greta Scacchi, who is another staple of 80s and 90s movies, who I loved, who sort of disappeared.
Gudmundsdóttir.
Who's terrific in that movie. It's also the movie now.
And Whoopi Goldberg.
It's the movie that introduced me,
Pie.
Steve.
What's that?
It's the movie that introduced me to Two Bunch Palms.
Oh, yes.
Because
yes,
in
right.
Two
Resort.
Bunch Palms, the Tim Robbins takes Greta Scacchi to
Right.
Two Bunch Palms to seduce her. It's this amazing spa resort in Palm Springs, and they're in the mud baths and everything. And I completely fell in love with Two Bunch. I ended up going up there because of the player,
Right.
and I love Two Bunch so much. I used to do my birthdays every year up at Two Bunch, where a bunch of friends. Steve
Yeah,
was
I
there.
went to
and
one of them. And
Darren,
it
I think.
really was.
I never
kind
got
of
to go.
So
Kind of a
and
thrill to
we
go
would
into
all
those
go
mud
up there
baths.
with whoever we were dating at the time, and we had these great birthday parties at Two Bunch Palms, and it was all because of the player. So I have such a soft spot in my heart for the player.
And yet you didn't select it. Why? I want to know why.
Because I
There's
think
so
that-
many.
Don't wait for the
There's
translation. Answer me
there's
now.
so many. I mean, because I would also say that the Robert Evans documentary, The Kid Stays in the Picture, is a great documentary about Bob Evans. And while I prefer to listen to the audio
Yeah.
book because it's just so much more depth to it and it's longer, the documentary is great.
Well, I would like to shine the light back in a little bit on making films and kind of feeling like positive. Get Shorty.
Oh, it's a great
Right.
choice too.
It's, I think it is Barry Sonnenfeld at his most restrained, which is a weird thing to say. And oddly enough, John Travolta at his most restrained. And yet,
And Gene Hackman,
and
it's least
Delroy
restrained.
Lindo.
Oh yeah, Delroy Lindo's great in that.
It's just so much fun. It's so cool. It is like the perfect marriage between material and filmmaker. Based on the Elmore Leonard novel, it kind of has this. I think it works as a film, as a story about filmmaking because John Travolta's character comes from the outside. And he is inherently interesting. His life and the world that he comes from is already interesting. And the collision between the world of organized crime and Hollywood and finding out that they were pretty much the same thing is fantastic. The dialogue is great. They say the fucking smog is the fucking reason the fucking sunsets are so beautiful in LA. Or Delroy Lindo talking about writing a screenplay. Well, you just put in some commas and shit.
It's Barry Sonnenfeld's most restrained movie. It's my favorite movie of his. I think Rene Russo, who owned the 90s with Thomas Crown Affair and Get Shorty and a bunch of other stuff she did, is fantastic. Danny DeVito is pitch perfect. It's just and that score that it's great. And Gene Hackman, who is great in everything. Is great. Is just sensational in that as a B movie producer, and which brings me to another movie. We have an embarrassment of riches this week, which Get Shorty makes me think of Argo.
Right.
Oh, sure,
I
yeah.
love Argo, and it has John Goodman as John Chambers from Planet of the Apes, the great makeup artist. I think Ben Affleck did a marvelous job directing that picture. It's set during the Iran hostage crisis, so the kid in his room has a 2XL and Battlestar Galactica action figures. So here we are, we're talking about the Iran hostage crisis, but I'm checking out the kid's room, and that's awesome, and he's watching. It must have been the 4:30 movie because he's watching Battle for the Planet of the Apes on TV.
Yep.
So I just and I think that first 10, 20 minutes of that movie is so intense. Sadly, I actually read the book that it's based on, and I think they missed out on some really great stuff that was part of the true story. So I feel like there were some missed opportunities, but that was only after the fact. When you find out that the true story is even more crazy than the story that they put on film.
Right.
But I really love that movie.
I've got two stories about that.
Yeah.
Two connections. The first is when the book first came out and people were going after the rights. I knew a producer who was going after it, and we really wanted to do that book and adapt it. So I actually flew out back to D.C., where I'm from, and I went to the Spy Museum and I spent the day with Tony Mendez. And he kind of told me everything, and he showed me the whole museum. It was amazing having that conversation with him. And, and my feeling, reading that book, and I think it carries through like in the movie, and what I told him is, look, that whole story is really about a guy who puts his wedding ring away. And his objective is to get back to it. Like, that's the story, that's the film. And it was such a pleasure meeting him. He doesn't look anything like Affleck.
But aren't they estranged in the movie, but in real life they were actually together?
Yeah.
That which is a crazy
very weird.
change. Usually it's the other way around.
And the other thing is that, and it's people kind of know this, maybe they don't. Argo, the film, quote unquote film that they were going to make, basically like took all of the production designs, all the art from an adaptation of Lord of Light. And it was all Jack Kirby artwork. Yep. Although the Jack Kirby artwork wasn't actually produced for the Lord of Light film. It was produced because the screenwriter and one of the producers on the film, who had the rights for 40 years, and I know because I just tried to set up Lord of Light as a TV show and failed because it's bananas. There's a fornicatorium in that book.
Is that anything like the Low Shop and Logan's Run?
Right. No, he wanted to set up a science fiction land. And so Jack Kirby did all of these designs for a science fiction land and using Lord of Light as the basis for it. So there was a script, that existed for this film that never got made. There was this big plan for science fiction land that never got built. And all of this beautiful artwork that got used in the most amazing way to save lives. And it's fantastic. And if you want to see the artwork, Heavy Metal Magazine, I want to say 2 years ago. No, it was only a year ago. It was about a year ago. Heavy Metal Magazine published all of that art. They published it, they colored it, all this other shit. They put out like an action figure, for Sam. It was just, it's cool. So you can have a little piece, you can see a little piece of movie history and real history, like right there. It's fascinating.
But the film that they're making in the movie, like when they're doing the read-through, it's sort of a combination of Roger Corman, like Battle Beyond the Stars or Crown International, Galaxina, and it has that kind of vibe to it, that 80s sci-fi Star Wars and the Shadow of Star Wars ripoff vibe, which is just so delightful. But I think there's so much tension in that movie, and it really shows Affleck is a filmmaker to be reckoned with. And, I'm not a big fan of multi-hyphenates, people who write, direct, act, because I'm so jealous of them. No, but, he's the real deal, I feel.
Stupid Orson Welles.
And, there's only a few Orson Welles, Woody Allen, people like that who, can master all those disciplines. They're few and far between. And but I think that Affleck with Argo really proved that he belongs, if not in that class, that he has the potential to be in that class.
Well, I had a couple other films I wanted to throw out, but very quickly to tie in off of Argo, John Goodman was in a film that's a lot of fun called Matinee, where he plays a William Castle-esque film producer who's showing his crazy. It's sort of Ed Wood-like bad horror movie down in Florida during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
And the film within a film, Mant,
right,
is great.
Cheesy monster movie. So I'm going to throw out a couple of documentaries because I love documentaries, and there are some really great documentaries about filmmaking. First one, Burden of Dreams, which is Werner Herzog's or Les Blanc's documentary about Werner Herzog's Fitzcarraldo, which is the story of making the movie is an epic in and of itself. The film Fitzcarraldo is ostensibly the story of moving a riverboat over a mountain in the deep jungles of South America. And they filmed this movie on location, and they were dealing with, hostile indigenous tribes and poisonous snakes. I mean, there's the stories and a leading man, Klaus Kinski, who was literally ready to murder Werner Herzog, and he famously said he was going to quit the film, and Herzog told him, if you get in that boat and leave, I have 5 bullets in my gun, and the 6th one is for me. I mean, it's a really terrific documentary about the epic struggle to make this film.
I love that Werner Herzog said he wants to play a Bond villain. I'd love to see that.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
My kid, by the way, my 9-year-old has, since he was about 4 years old, been able to do a spot-on Werner Herzog. What? Because Herzog narrated and somehow produced, had something to do with this animated dinosaur movie called Dinosaurs Alive, which is sort of like a It's not a documentary, but it's sort of presented as though it's a documentary, and he narrates it. And my son at this point was watching these documentaries, like Planet Dinosaur, all this other shit, and he would just repeat the dialogue back. But he didn't know what an accent was, so he's doing John Hurt. He's doing Kenneth Branagh. And then, all of a sudden he pops off with a Werner Herzog. Like, Daddy, we have to cross oceans of time to... And I'm like, what are you saying to me, man? What's happening? So, yeah, Werner Herzog is a Bond villain.
I'm on board.
Or my 9-year-old.
The other couple documentaries I want to mention, one is called Overnight, which is a documentary about the filmmaker of Boondock Saints, and how he went on this crazy ego trip and was documenting, had his buddies make a film about himself because he's convinced he was going to be the next superstar director.
I used to go drinking occasionally at that bar where
he famously
he made Weinstein's buy for him.
Yeah, as part of his deal for his big script, they had to buy him a bar. And anyway, it's a really funny, horrific film about an ego trip. And then another movie that I revisit at least once a year is American Movie. The documentary about this guy is very similar to Ed Wood in a way. This kind
Colvin.
This guy Mark Borchardt up in Wisconsin, who is a really passionate film lover and is desperately trying to get his films made any way he can, and he does it with his good friend Mike Shank, and he drafts his mother into it and his friends, and it's just such an kind of an inspiring story to me. This guy, he's not particularly talented, although I think he does have an eye. He does have a good cinematic eye.
You're being charitable.
No, I think you look at some of the images; they're actually pretty striking, and I just find it really. I always feel really good watching this movie because this is a guy who's he's so passionate, and it's infectious in a way, and I just really identify with his struggle, desperately trying to get this movie made, and kind of succeeding making his short film. But I don't know. I really,
Well, I have to say, here you talked about a few documentaries. There's such an embarrassment of riches. I mean, we touched on some, but there are still a few masterpieces we haven't even discussed. For Friday, we have to keep in mind. I mean, look, I mentioned Barton Fink. I don't think that should be Friday, but it's a great film about filmmaking, Coen Brothers. They also, Hail Caesar is, I personally like. It doesn't belong, I think, among the best, but there's so many great things about it, including introducing the world to Alden Ehrenreich. But there's some fantastic scenes in that movie, even if it doesn't hold on, and it's about Eddie Mannix, fictionalized version of Eddie Mannix, the old MGM fixer, which is, I think, a great story still to be told. But I mean, we didn't even mention Fellini's 8.5. Right. We didn't mention Paul Thomas Anderson's Boogie Nights.
As opposed to Paul W.S. Anderson's Boogie Nights.
Clint Eastwood's White Hunter Black Heart.
Right, about John Huston. And then
Singing in the Rain.
Well, I was just going to say how we neglected to mention, and I guess it's because we think about this, if we were doing a musical week, it would be a shoo-in.
Yeah. Right.
It probably is one of the great movies ever made about old Hollywood, but we don't think about it as a Hollywood movie, even though it probably, next to Sunset Boulevard, is the best of all these movies.
Right. Bowfinger.
Bowfinger,
oh my God, Bowfinger. Yeah.
A wonderful comedy from Frank Oz.
Love it.
Steve Martin,
delightful.
Eddie Murphy.
It's like the color version of Ed Wood.
Yeah.
And then one that Darren and I really wanted to talk about. How can we have a conversation about this topic without this movie?
1968, The Oscar.
Oh, well, we may have a winner for Friday. Tell us about the Oscar.
Oh my goodness!
Or is Harlan Ellison around to talk about it?
Harlan Ellison wrote the screenplay. Seriously,
it's based on a novel, a best-selling novel, by the way.
And it is the funniest film ever made.
Unintentionally.
Stephen Boyd plays this sort of scrappy, streetwise hustler barker for a stripper named Frankie Fain.
Frank Fain.
It's all about Eve, basically done in
but
film.
with a guy. Yeah,
with a guy. Yeah.
All about Adam.
Yes. Oh, there you go.
And his best
about
pal
Frankie.
is played by Tony Bennett, plays Jaime Kelly, the Irish Jew.
And introducing Tony Bennett as Jaime
In
Kelly.
his first and only starring
And Milton
role.
Berle as his agent.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean,
it's just...
Elkie Summer, I mean, yeah.
He's so
Joseph
bad.
Cotton
Joseph
is a
Cotton
studio
plays
head.
the studio head. Oh.
Now, the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences has sort of seen to this film being buried, so it's very hard to see. We saw it, I think, all together at the American Cinematheque many years ago, where its screenwriter, Harlan Ellison, spoke.
Right.
And throughout the movie, there are just these huge guffaws of laughter.
Well, a lot of them coming from yours truly.
yeah. And
Because it was the first time I had seen the film.
first time I saw it.
And I was laughing hysterically. And I have a very loud, high laugh.
Yeah.
And Harlan sort of called me out on it. And
boy.
he thought that I was a loudmouthed woman sitting in the back laughing at his precious movie.
Oh,
But
he was-
I thought it was
Which is funny, coming
hilarious.
from a loudmouthed himself. You think he would be able to
rest in
appreciate it.
peace.
Right.
But this is
still.
a piece of crap.
Well, you know, he was very sensitive about that, and I know several people who were very close to Harlan, and I know he was really upset at that screening. He apparently walked out of that screening about 10 or 15 minutes into it
Thanks,
because of
Darren.
the audience reaction, and I was told he walked the streets of Hollywood Boulevard for the next hour and
Cursing
a half.
like a homeless man.
Yeah, and then came back, and to his credit, he came back
I
for
did the
Q&A,
Q&A, and it was
Yeah.
a great
and he was
Q&A.
great.
Yep.
And you know, I don't have a lot of wall space in my house for movie posters. I have a movie poster up for Ed Wood, and I also have a movie poster for the Oscar.
A giant movie
Huge
poster.
French 3-sheet, and a beautiful stone litho artwork. And
that
I
sounds
keep
great.
it as sort of a cautionary tale for Hollywood, because the story of Frank Fain, he's this guy who's so obsessed with fame and fortune, and he will burn anyone to
get there,
claw his
yeah.
way to the top of that glass mountain called success. It's filled with all this great, overheated, overbaked, over-the-top dialogue, bad behavior. I mean, he screws over anyone he can. Gosh, what's his name? Ernest Borgnine is
Right.
in it as a kind of a detective that
Kids
he
love
hires
Ernest
to part of a
Borgnine.
smear campaign.
Who later turns blackmailer
Turns blackmailer
to
yeah.
him. And
It's I love this movie.
there's just so many machinations in it. And also, if you can find it, SCTV in the early 80s did a parody of it back when no one knew what the Oscar was. This was something that they made just for themselves. They called it the Nobel. It's 15 minutes long. It's exactly the same story. Dave Thomas plays Frankie Fain as a scientist who, fakes science to get the Nobel.
Win the Nobel.
Wow.
It's hilarious.
I had seen that parody long before I ever saw the movie that it was based on. It does run occasionally on Turner Classic Movies. I know it's played on TCM at least once or twice.
I'm so indebted to our mutual friend, Alan Spencer, who created Sledgehammer, for introducing us to that film. He was the one
He
who
made me a
told us
DVD
about
from
it.
an old VHS
Super
tape
VHS.
that he had of it.
Not
Yeah,
even VHS, Super VHS. Before we render our final judgment, I want to just mention really quickly a couple other wonderful films. There's Christopher Guest David Mamet, State and Maine, which I like.
Oh, yes.
You could say, certainly Mulholland Drive, David Lynch's brilliant movie. Steve Railsback in The Stuntman
Stuntman.
is
yeah.
a terrific
In fact,
film.
I just watched that maybe 2 weeks ago. Steve Railsback runs the gamut from A to B. He is so wooden and repulsive in that movie. Peter O'Toole is amazing.
Well, he's
but
always amazing.
I think The Stuntman is highly overrated.
it has
in my personal
actually
opinion.
the highest high fall
Oh,
that was
yeah.
ever shot, except that it didn't make it into the film.
Right.
How insane is that? And I think that one of the stuntmen died, doing that stunt.
Ironic.
Very ironic, right? But not I don't know. It's
Not
a
doing a
super
stunt.
cool film. If you are into the world of just
Yeah,
stuntmen.
and if
you know what
you're
I mean? It's
into
like,
San Diego,
yeah,
you know,
Yeah.
it's like
Hotel
a fun,
Coronado.
sort of like Coronado Island. I mean, and a couple other things. William Atherton in Day of the Locust, he was a character actor who was in everything, usually playing sort of these loathsome, sort of slimy guys like in Die Hard and Ghostbusters. But he's a leading man in Day of the Locust based on the novel, and it's good, not great. I mean, my two other great movies about filmmaking would be De Palma's Blowout, about a sound man who is trying to recreate a murder, and of course has a very surprising twist, and is virtuoso filmmaking by Brian De Palma. And Nancy Allen is great, and it's set against the backdrop of the bicentennial. And then Woody Allen's Stardust Memories, which is about Woody Allen's character going to a film festival in which one of the characters famously or infamously says, I really like your work, especially the early funny ones. So, which I just think, and Sharon Stone had one of her earliest roles in that, and Charlotte Rampling is just phenomenal.
Luminous.
Luminous is a better description, as is Jessica Walter. Not Jessica Walter. Who was it? It was Jessica. No, Jessica. Who was it again? Jessica Harper.
Jessica Tandy.
No, there's not. And and it's just, I just think, and it's beautifully shot by Gordon Willis. It is. Is it the last of their collaborations? Gordy Willis. I think it was 1980, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, no, maybe it wasn't, but it may be next to Manhattan, probably their most beautiful visual collaboration.
I have a couple more quick
Oh my
ones.
God! There's more.
Gods and Monsters.
Oh, yeah.
about the
Yeah,
making
yeah.
of Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah,
There's
James Whale.
a film that Mark and I saw at the Telluride Film Festival, Shadow of the Vampire.
Oh, yes.
With Willem Dafoe playing a vampire, starring in Nosferatu as they're making those in the silent film era.
That was such a great evening, Steve, because we had first we'd seen the original Nosferatu with piano accompaniment, and we saw Shadow of the Vampire, and we were coming down on this tram.
No, it was the other way around. We saw Shadow of the Vampire, and we
oh,
were
and then
up at
we
this
saw
theater.
Nosferatu.
It was literally a dark and stormy night.
Literally, right? Lightning, thunder,
Rain,
and we're on this tram.
This gondola,
And it stops in the middle of the storm,
my God.
and
Oh my
we're
God.
creaking back and
forth. Finally, it starts running again, and it gets to the bottom of the hill, and it swings around. It
like
doesn't
super high
stop,
speed.
and we leap from the gondola. It was crazy.
And then one last one, the film from last year, The Disaster Artist.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Which was a lot of fun
didn't
about
do
the
it.
making of, another Ed Wood style movie about a guy who has
to show
great
his ass.
dreams of making a film and makes this notoriously terrible film. I guess the modern version of Plan 9 from Outer Space.
It'd be a good
The
on a
Room,
double
Tommy
bill with
Wiseau.
Ed Wood. Ed Wood's the
Yeah.
better film, but
Yeah.
Disaster Artist would be good on a double
It's an
bill.
entertaining film.
We got to decide, don't we?
We got to decide. To me, and you tell me if you agree, I think it's a toss-up between not Sunset Boulevard. No. It's a toss-up between The Player and
And the Oscar.
Yes, that's I think it's a toss-up between The Player and the Oscar. What do you think?
I was gonna pull for Get Shorty a little bit, but I have to say that I think that the Oscar is an amazing choice because it is so bad. It is just endlessly entertaining, and I would run home early from school.
You
just to
might
watch
be able.
that.
It might be on YouTube. I don't know. It's funny. It's out of print, so it might be out there available. So it's something.
And
to keep
what
an
a
eye on.
what a appropriate tribute to Harlan Ellison, who passed away recently. The great, brilliant, opinionated Harlan Ellison.
Be careful what you're remembered for.
To honor this movie, this wonderfully wacky, extraordinary product of its age.
I don't think he should feel bad about it. I know he does, and it's a sore point
Did.
for him. He did. I know he felt bad about it, but it really has. It's so entertaining.
It's like Roger Ebert writing Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. It's just like one of these things where you can't really blame them. You just sort of you got to respect them in a way.
Yeah.
Or Gene Roddenberry doing Pretty Maids all in a row.
Right.
They're all awful,
Yeah.
but they're delightfully awful. And so much the better for us having those films in our lives.
So I wonder if we maybe want to switch up the order and maybe start the week with Sunset Boulevard, since it's a heavy hitter.
So let's try this. Sunset Boulevard Monday.
Then maybe Ed Wood on Tuesday.
Ed Wood Tuesday.
Then the big picture.
Big picture in the Tropic Thunder on Thursday. And then bringing the Thunder on Friday.
The
Oscar. God, this was
We have a week.
This
was a
was
tough week.
a hell of a week. This
Hell of a week.
This is a tough one, and I wasn't sure we were going to get through it, to be honest.
It's our longest one yet.
I want
That's
to.
saying something.
This was incredible. The Kids Stay in the Picture week. Really great movies. You can't go wrong with any of the movies we talked about this week. I want to remind you that Ashley Miller's show, working on Sean Crouch's brilliant Lore Season 2, is debuting on Amazon Prime this month, so check that out. Steve, you have Star Wars Resistance debuting on Disney Channel. And
I got nothing.
you do. You got the 430 Movie website at
Oh, yes, that's right.
430movie.com.
430movie.com.
Featuring amazing 430 Movie podcast swag, as well as a link to all our previous episodes.
And coffee cups.
And coffee cups. Let's not forget the coffee cups. And, of course, I am going to be at the New York Comic Con speaking about Battlestar Galactica and moderating with Chris Parnell of Sony Pictures Television, a Ron Moore masterclass. Tickets are still on sale. And my book, So Say We All, An Oral History of Battlestar Galactica, is available wherever fine books are sold. And if you want to continue the conversations, or if we missed a movie, which I find hard to believe, where can they follow you on Twitter, Mr. Miller?
You can follow me at Ashmaster0 on Twitter. And also, I will be at the Austin Film Festival from October 24th to the 27th. You can find me in the Driscoll Bar. If you buy me a drink, I might give you an opinion.
He'll be the one in the 430 Movie T-shirt.
Damn right I will.
And if you like what we have to say, please go on Apple Podcasts or wherever you consume your podcast and rate us with the highest rating possibly available. Steve Melching.
You can follow me on Twitter at Stephen Melching. And don't forget Day for Night and Living in Oblivion.
Oh, my God, he's still going. He's still going.
Stop the movies.
Brad Pitt and Peter Dinklage, if I'm not mistaken, Living in Oblivion.
Get me Dinklage.
And that, we haven't seen it yet because it's debuting this month on HBO. The Hervé Villechaize story about making the man with the golden gun in Fantasy Island.
Yep.
Which I can't wait to see.
You can reach me at Twitter at Darren Doc, 1R.
And I'm Mark A. Altman at Mark A. Altman on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you for joining us this week for the Kids Stay in the Picture Week. Films about filmmaking on the 430 Movie. We'll be back with an all-new theme week next week, only on the 430 Movie. This has been the 430 Movie Special Encore Edition. And this is your host, Mark A. Altman. I want to remind you that we'll be back with all new episodes of the 430 Movie this spring for Season 2. We thank you for joining us for the special encore presentation, and we hope you'll join us for some of our other shows on the Electric Surge Network, including the ultimate podcast for Star Trek fans with a life, the hit podcast Inglorious Treksperts about all things Trek. If you haven't checked out this show, please do, because it's awesome. And I don't say that about everything, but this is a great show and you'll love it. We also have, for you film fans, the best movies never made. This is Jodorowsky's Dune producer, Steven Scarlatta, and Josh Miller, writer of Sonic the Hedgehog, where every other Monday they look inside the making or unmaking of a film that never saw the light of a projector bulb with special guests, directors, writers, producers. There have been some great episodes on E.T. 2, Night Skies, Johnny Quest, Godzilla, He-Man and the Master of the Universe with Adam Rifkin. And, of course, Rob Burnett and myself join them as we talk about Free Enterprise, The Wrath of Shatner, the aborted Free Enterprise sequel. So some great episodes coming up. We hope you'll join us for that wonderful show. And, of course, if you're a Star Trek Discovery fan, join Chase Masterson and her special guests every Sunday night as they do a deep dive into the world of Star Trek Discovery. And meanwhile, Ashley, Darren, Steve, and myself will be back with all new episodes of the 430 Movie this spring for Season 2. Thanks for being a 430 Movie fan, and we'll see you at the movies. This podcast is a production of the Electric Surge Network.